The sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the emergency room buzzed with quiet urgency. Nurses rushed from one bed to another, the rhythmic beeping of monitors creating a steady hum of tension in the background. Among the patients and families, a golden retriever named Max stood out, his glossy coat gleaming under the harsh hospital lights. Max wasn't just any dog. He was the service companion of a young boy named Liam, who lay unconscious in a hospital bed nearby. Liam, just 10 years old, had been rushed to the ER following a sudden collapse at home. His parents, Emma and Daniel, hovered by his side, their faces etched with worry. The doctors had run test after test, but the cause of Liam's condition remained a mystery. It was as if his body had just given up without warning. Max had been by Liam's side since the day he was adopted, a loyal protector who rarely left the boy's shadow. But today, Max was acting strangely. The usually calm and obedient dog had become restless, his eyes darting between Liam and the hospital staff. Occasionally, he let out a low growl, his ears flattening against his head, a behavior so uncharacteristic it unsettled even Emma, who had always trusted Max's instincts. "Maybe he's just scared," Daniel whispered, trying to console his wife as Max paced back and forth at the foot of Liam's bed. But Max wasn't scared, he was alert, his gaze fixated on Dr. Carter, the senior physician overseeing Liam's care. Every time Dr. Carter entered the room, Max would stiffen, his tail dropping, and a soft growl rumbling deep in his chest. "Is something wrong with your dog?" Dr. Carter asked, attempting to sound nonchalant but failing to hide his irritation. Emma frowned. "Max has never behaved like this before. He's usually so calm." The tension in the room grew as Max's behavior became more pronounced. He barked loudly whenever Dr. Carter approached Liam's bed, his body rigid and his eyes locked on the doctor. Daniel reached down to calm the dog, but Emma stopped him. "What if Max is trying to tell us something?" she murmured, her voice trembling. As Max's barking intensified, a wave of unease rippled through the room. The truth behind his actions would soon unravel, and it would leave everyone shattered. Dr. Carter's frown deepened as Max's barking reverberated through the emergency room. Nurses glanced toward the scene, whispering amongst themselves, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. Emma placed a soothing hand on Max's head, but the dog wouldn't relent. His gaze was unwavering, fixed on the doctor, as if he were a threat. "I can't work under these conditions," Dr. Carter snapped, taking a step back. "Get this dog under control, or it will have to leave." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but Emma spoke first. "Max has been Liam's companion for years. He's never acted like this before." Her voice cracked under the strain. "If he's reacting this way, maybe we should listen." Dr. Carter's lips tightened. "Dogs aren't medical professionals, Mrs. Wilson. Your son needs calm, not chaos." Before Emma could reply, Max lunged forward, barking sharply. He stopped just short of Liam's bed, his body tense, and let out a series of loud, insistent barks that silenced the entire room. Dr. Carter took another step back, his face pale. "Something's wrong," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. She turned to a young nurse standing nearby. "Please, can we check on Liam again? Maybe Max senses something we've missed." The nurse hesitated, glancing nervously at Dr. Carter. "I'll get the portable monitor," she said finally, hurrying out of the room. As the nurse fetched the equipment, Daniel knelt beside Max. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly. Max let out a low whine, then barked again, nudging Daniel toward the corner of the room where Dr. Carter stood. Emma followed Max's line of sight and froze. "Why is he looking at you, Dr. Carter?" she asked, her tone sharper than intended. Dr. Carter's expression hardened. "This is absurd. The dog is likely agitated because of the commotion. I've done nothing to upset him." The young nurse returned, wheeling in a portable heart monitor. She began attaching the leads to Liam's small chest, her hands trembling slightly under the tension in the room. The machine beeped softly as it powered on. Suddenly Max barked again, his tone urgent. Emma noticed something then. Liam's breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling at irregular intervals. "What's happening?" she cried, gripping Daniel's arm. The nurse's face fell as she studied the monitor. "His oxygen levels are dropping," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. This wasn't happening earlier. Dr. Carter stepped forward, his professional demeanor returning. "We need to intubate immediately. Prepare the crash cart," he ordered. But Emma wasn't convinced. "Why didn't we notice this before?" she demanded. "We've been here for hours. Wasn't anyone monitoring him?" Dr. Carter avoided her gaze, focusing instead on the nurse, who scurried to gather the necessary supplies. "Sometimes these changes occur suddenly," he said. "We're doing everything we can." Max, however, didn't seem satisfied. He continued barking, now pacing anxiously between Liam's bed and the corner of the room where Dr. Carter stood. It was as if he was trying to tell them something more. "Wait," Daniel said, standing. "What if Max isn't just alerting us to Liam's condition? What if there's something else going on?" Emma looked at him, her heart racing. "What are you saying?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, his brow furrowing. "But Max has never led us astray before. Maybe he knows something we don't." The tension in the room was palpable. Dr. Carter glanced at the clock on the wall, his expression tight. "We don't have time for speculation," he said sharply. "Your son's life is at stake." Emma's mind raced. She had always trusted Max's instincts, but questioning a doctor in the middle of an emergency felt reckless. Still, Max's behavior was too unusual to ignore. "Doctor," Emma said, her voice firm, "I want a second opinion, now." Dr. Carter stiffened. "I'm the senior physician here. There's no one more qualified." Before he could finish, the door to the room opened, and another doctor walked in. It was Dr. Harper, a colleague of Carter's known for her thoroughness and compassion. She took in the scene quickly. The anxious parents, the distressed dog, and the pale child on the bed. "What's going on?" Dr. Harper asked. Emma didn't hesitate. "Something's wrong with Liam. But Max, he keeps barking at Dr. Carter. I don't know why, but I think he's trying to tell us something." Dr. Harper raised an eyebrow, but approached Liam's bed without comment. She examined the monitor, and then Liam himself, her movements swift and precise. "His oxygen levels are dangerously low," she said, her tone serious. "What treatment has he received so far?" As Dr. Carter began to answer, Max barked again, drawing everyone's attention. This time, Dr. Harper noticed the dog's focus on her colleague. Her sharp eyes narrowed. "Why's the dog barking at you, Carter?" "It's a dog, Harper," he snapped. "They bark. It's what they do." Dr. Harper wasn't convinced. She turned back to Liam, her brow furrowing as she examined the IV line connected to his arm. "This dosage," she murmured, trailing off. She checked the chart and then turned back to Carter, her expression hard. "These numbers don't add up." Dr. Harper's voice cut through the tense air like a blade. "This dosage is wrong. Liam has been given the incorrect medication." Emma's heart dropped. "What? What are you saying?" she demanded, her voice trembling. She clutched Daniel's arm as if grounding herself from the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Dr. Harper held up the IV bag, her sharp eyes scanning the label. "This dosage is too high for a child Liam's size. If we hadn't caught this in time..." She didn't finish her sentence, but the implication was clear. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. "How could this have happened?" Dr. Carter bristled, his composure wavering. "Mistakes happen," he said curtly. "The staff must have misread the chart." Max barked sharply again, cutting through the conversation. He paced nervously between Liam's bed and Dr. Carter, his ears flattened and tail stiff. Emma looked at Max, then at Dr. Harper, her instincts telling her there was more to the story. "Max doesn't think this was a mistake," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. "Do you, boy?" Dr. Harper turned to Dr. Carter, her gaze piercing. "This isn't just a mistake," she said firmly. "This dosage wasn't prescribed in Liam's chart. Someone deliberately ordered it." The room fell into stunned silence. Daniel's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. "Are you saying someone tried to harm our son?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Dr." Carter's face reddened. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "You're accusing me of something I'd never do. I've been a doctor for over 20 years. Dr. Harper didn't back down. "I'm not accusing anyone yet, but this needs to be investigated immediately." Emma's mind raced as she processed Dr. Harper's words. Her eyes flicked to Max, who was now growling softly, his body still positioned protectively near Liam's bed. "Max knew," she whispered. "He's been trying to warn us this whole time." Dr. Harper moved swiftly, calling over a nurse. "Secure this IV bag as evidence," she ordered. "I want the pharmacy logs pulled, and I want to know exactly who signed off on this dosage." "Doctor." Carter stepped forward, his voice rising. "You're blowing this out of proportion. The boy needs treatment, not a witch hunt." "Enough, Carter," Dr. Harper said coldly. "If you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear." The tension in the room was suffocating. Emma and Daniel stood frozen, their emotions oscillating between fear and rage. The image of their vulnerable son lying helpless on the bed was unbearable. "Dr. Carter," Emma said, her voice shaking but determined, "if you didn't do this, then prove it. Help us find out who did." Dr. Carter opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Max let out a low growl and lunged toward him. The sudden movement startled everyone, and Dr. Carter stumbled back, his hand brushing against the tray of medical instruments. "Control that animal," he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Daniel stepped forward, grabbing Max's collar and pulling him back. "What's going on, Max?" he asked softly, trying to calm the dog, but Max's gaze remained locked on Dr. Carter, his growls deep and menacing. Dr. Harper's eyes narrowed as she observed the interaction. "Carter," she said slowly, "why does the dog seem so fixated on you?" "I don't know," he barked. "Maybe it smells my lunch. Dogs are unpredictable." But his defensive tone only deepened the suspicion in the room. Emma stepped closer to Dr. Harper, her voice quiet but firm. "Something isn't right," she said. "Max has never acted like this before. He knows something." Dr. Harper nodded, her expression grave. "I think you're right, Mrs. Wilson. And I intend to find out what—" The nurse returned with a clipboard in hand, her face pale. "Dr. Harper," she said hesitantly, "the pharmacy logs show that Dr. Carter approved this dosage." Emma gasped, and Daniel's face turned dark with fury. "You signed off on this," he demanded, his voice a dangerous growl. Dr. Carter's face twisted in anger. "I didn't approve anything. This is some kind of mistake." Max barked again, louder this time, and Dr. Harper's expression hardened. "Enough lies, Carter. You're not leaving this room until we get answers." The air crackled with tension as Dr. Carter's facade began to crack. His eyes darted to the door, his body shifting as if he were considering making a run for it. Max growled low in his throat, his sharp eyes tracking the doctor's every move. "Tell the truth," Dr. Harper demanded. "Why did you prescribe that dosage?" "I didn't," Dr. Carter snapped, his voice rising in desperation. "This is all a misunderstanding." But no one in the room believed him anymore. The truth was beginning to surface, and with it came a devastating realization. Liam's life had been intentionally put in danger, and the person responsible was standing right in front of them. The air in the hospital room felt electrified, heavy with mistrust and simmering anger. Dr. Carter's desperate denials echoed in Emma's mind as she clutched Liam's hand. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound grounding her, a fragile tether in the chaos. Daniel stood with clenched fists, every muscle in his body taut. "You're lying," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You were ready to gamble with my son's life, and now you're trying to cover your tracks." Dr. Carter's face twisted with indignation. "I've spent my entire career saving lives. I would never harm a patient, let alone a child." Max growled softly, his body still tense and positioned between Liam and the doctor. Emma knelt beside Max, stroking his fur to calm him. "He's never been wrong," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Max always knows." Dr. Harper, standing tall and composed, gestured for quiet. "Enough," she said firmly. "This isn't about accusations or emotions right now. We need facts. Carter, until we determine what happened, you're relieved of your duties." Dr. Carter's face turned a deep shade of red. "You have no authority." "Try me," Dr. Harper interrupted, her voice like steel. "Security will escort you out if you don't comply." The room fell silent as two security guards arrived, their presence solidifying Dr. Harper's authority. Dr. Carter glared at everyone in the room, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Max. "This isn't over," he hissed before storming out. As the door closed behind him, Emma let out a shaky breath. "What now?" she asked, looking at Dr. Harper. Dr. Harper sighed, her professionalism softening for a moment. "We'll launch a full investigation. In the meantime, I'll personally oversee Liam's care." Emma and Daniel nodded, their trust in Dr. Harper solidifying with every word. "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I want to know, why would someone do this? Who would target our son?" Dr. Harper shook her head. "That's what we need to find out. For now, let's focus on stabilizing Liam and ensuring he's safe." Max barked sharply, drawing everyone's attention. He sniffed the ground near the discarded IV bag, his nose tracing a path toward the door. Emma frowned. "He's trying to tell us something." Daniel crouched beside Max, his expression determined. "What is it, boy? Do you know something?" Max barked again and pulled gently at Daniel's sleeve, urging him toward the door. Dr. Harper watched with growing curiosity. "This dog is extraordinary," she said. "If he's following a scent, we should let him lead us." Emma hesitated. "What if it's dangerous? Liam—" "I'll stay with him," Dr. Harper said firmly. "You and Daniel follow Max. Find out what he's trying to show you." Emma nodded, her heart pounding as she and Daniel followed Max into the hallway. The dog moved with purpose, his nose close to the floor. Nurses and patients looked on curiously as they passed, the unusual sight drawing murmurs of speculation. Max led them down a series of corridors, finally stopping at a locked storage room. He barked sharply, his tail wagging with urgency. Daniel tried the handle, but it didn't budge. "It's locked," he said, frustration evident in his tone. Emma glanced around and spotted a janitor nearby. "Excuse me," she called, her voice trembling. "Could you open this door for us? We think there's something important inside." The janitor looked hesitant but nodded, producing a key ring. "What's this about?" he asked, his gaze flickering between the couple and Max. "It's about our son," Emma said simply, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with medical supplies and stacks of paperwork. Max darted inside, his nose leading him to a desk in the corner. He barked insistently, pawing at a drawer. Daniel wasted no time pulling the drawer open. Inside, they found a stack of patient files, a few loose syringes, and a small vial of liquid with no label. Emma's eyes widened. "What is this?" Daniel picked up the vial, examining it closely. "This doesn't belong here," he said. "And it doesn't look like anything Liam's been prescribed." Max barked again, his eyes fixed on the file at the top of the stack. Emma picked it up, flipping through the pages. Her breath caught in her throat. "This file, it's for another child. But look, the medication listed matches what Liam was almost given." Daniel's face darkened as he pieced it together. Someone switched the files. They meant to harm this other child, but used Liam's chart instead. Emma's stomach churned. But why? Who would do this? Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and the couple turned to see Dr. Harper approaching. She took one look at the vial and the files, and her expression turned grim. "We need to take this to administration immediately," she said. "Whoever did this has access to sensitive information, and they're dangerous." Max barked one final time, as if affirming Dr. Harper's words. Emma knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she stroked his fur. "You saved Liam," she whispered. "You might have saved another child too." As they left the storage room, evidence in hand, Emma and Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whoever was behind this wouldn't get away with it, not as long as Max was on their side. The discovery in the storage room was only the beginning. As Emma, Daniel, and Max handed the vial and files over to Dr. Harper, a sinking realization hit them. Whoever had tampered with Liam's medication was still within the hospital. The stakes were higher than ever. Dr. Harper wasted no time. She brought the evidence to the hospital administrator, Mr. Ellis, a stern yet fair man with decades of experience managing crises. As he examined the vial and the files, his expression grew graver by the second. "This is serious," he said, his voice low. "If what you're saying is true, we may have someone deliberately endangering patients. We'll need to investigate discreetly. Panic among staff or patients could jeopardize everything." Emma spoke up, her voice trembling. "Discreetly? Someone tried to kill my son. How do we know they won't try again?" Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "She's right, Liam's still vulnerable. And if whoever did this realizes we're onto them, they might escalate." Mr. Ellis nodded solemnly. "I'll arrange for increased security around Liam's room. Dr. Harper, I trust you to lead the medical side of this investigation. We'll also review security footage to identify anyone suspicious." "Thank you," Emma said, though her unease remained. The idea that someone had access to her son was unbearable. Meanwhile, Max's behavior became even more remarkable. He refused to leave Liam's side, sitting by his bed as though standing guard. Every time a nurse or doctor entered the room, Max watched them intently, his ears perking up at the slightest noise. His vigilance was both comforting and unnerving. It was as if he knew danger was still nearby. One afternoon, as Emma sat by Liam's bedside, she noticed Max growl softly when a nurse entered the room. The nurse, a young woman named Amanda, smiled nervously. "Just here to check his vitals," she said, avoiding eye contact with Max. Emma's gaze sharpened. "Max doesn't growl at people for no reason," she said cautiously. "Have you worked with Liam before?" Amanda hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the stethoscope around her neck. "I'm new," she admitted. "Just transferred from another department." "Doctor," Harper entered the room at that moment, her expression neutral but observant. "Amanda, can you assist with another patient in 2B? I'll take over here," she said smoothly. The nurse nodded quickly and left, her pace a little too hurried. Emma looked at Dr. Harper. "Did you see that? Max reacted to her." Dr. Harper's brow furrowed. "I did. I'll have her background checked immediately. Max seems to be onto something." While Liam rested, Emma and Daniel decided to dig deeper into the mystery themselves. With Max leading the way, they retraced their steps to the storage room, hoping they might have missed something. This time, Max led them to a different corner of the room, sniffing around an old filing cabinet. Daniel pulled open the drawer Max indicated and discovered more patient files, all with notes that didn't align with their respective cases. "These files," Daniel muttered, flipping through the pages. "It's like someone's deliberately altering records." Emma's stomach churned. What if this isn't just about Liam? What if this person has been targeting other patients too? They took the files to Dr. Harper, who agreed to cross-reference them with recent cases. As she scanned the records, her face grew pale. "This is worse than I thought," she said grimly. These patients were all given incorrect medications or treatments, but none of the mistakes were caught in time. "Were any of them?" Emma couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Harper nodded solemnly. "Several fatalities. This is no coincidence." As the pieces began to fall into place, Emma and Daniel realized they were up against more than a rogue nurse or careless doctor. This was deliberate, systematic even. They began to suspect a larger conspiracy within the hospital, one that might go beyond individual malice. Late one night, as Emma sat with Liam, Max suddenly perked up and growled low. His hackles rose, and he stared at the window. Emma's heart raced as she followed his gaze. There, just beyond the glass, a shadow moved. She grabbed her phone and called Daniel, who was just down the hall. "There's someone outside," she whispered urgently. Max sees them. Daniel rushed into the room moments later, his face set with determination. Together, they peeked through the curtains, but the figure was gone. All that remained was the faint imprint of footprints in the garden below. "They're watching us," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "Whoever it is, they know we're getting close." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then we have to act fast. Max is right, this isn't over." Back at the administrator's office, Mr. Ellis reviewed the security footage. One clip caught his attention. Amanda, the nurse Max had growled at, was seen entering the storage room on multiple occasions, often at odd hours. In another clip, she was seen speaking in hushed tones with someone off camera, a shadowy figure whose identity couldn't be discerned. When Dr. Harper brought this information to Emma and Daniel, the pieces began to connect. "Amanda isn't working alone," Dr. Harper said. "This is bigger than we thought." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "What do they want? Why target Liam?" Dr. Harper shook her head. "I don't know yet, but one thing is clear, we're running out of time." As the days passed, the web of mystery grew tighter, leaving Emma and Daniel emotionally stretched thin. The looming threat to their son, combined with the revelation of broader hospital corruption, felt like an insurmountable weight. Every moment with Liam felt both precious and precarious, while Max's unwavering loyalty provided their only semblance of security. Dr. Harper, now deeply embroiled in uncovering the truth, arranged a private meeting with Mr. Ellis, Emma, and Daniel in her office. A stack of patient files sat ominously on her desk, alongside notes detailing the discrepancies she and her team had unearthed. "This isn't just negligence," Dr. Harper began, her voice firm but laden with concern. "It's systemic. Someone has been manipulating patient records and administering harmful treatments. Amanda is likely just one part of this." Emma clasped her hands tightly. "But why? What do they gain from this?" Dr. Harper hesitated before answering. "In some cases, the discrepancies seem to point to medical experiments, unauthorized trials, perhaps. In others, it's about covering up malpractice or inflating charges for treatments that were never given." Daniel's jaw clenched. "And Liam? Was he part of their experiment?" Dr. Harper shook her head. "It's unclear. But the altered medication, the vial we found, it suggests someone wanted to ensure he didn't recover. That's deliberate sabotage." Max, ever vigilant, seemed attuned to the growing tension. His behavior became even more protective, following Emma wherever she went and standing guard by Liam's crib at night. One evening, as Emma tried to soothe her restless son, she noticed Max staring at the baby monitor with unnerving intensity. His ears perked, and he let out a soft growl. "What is it, Max?" Emma whispered, fear creeping into her voice. She picked up the monitor and listened closely. At first, there was nothing but the faint hum of static. But then, faintly, she heard footsteps, soft but deliberate. Her heart raced as she grabbed her phone and dialed Daniel, who had stepped out for a quick run to the cafeteria. "Daniel, someone's in the house," she whispered urgently. "I can hear them on the monitor. Stay where you are." "I'm coming," Daniel replied, his voice tight with worry. Max growled louder, his eyes fixed on the doorway. Emma locked the door and clutched Liam close, her mind racing with scenarios of what could happen if the intruder made it into the room. Meanwhile, Daniel sprinted through the hospital corridors, his adrenaline surging. He nearly collided with Dr. Harper, who had been reviewing security footage in her office. "What's going on?" she asked, alarmed. "Emma thinks someone's in the house," Daniel explained breathlessly. "We have to get there now." Dr. Harper nodded and grabbed her phone. "I'll call security to meet us there. Let's go." The two raced to the elevator, their urgency palpable. As the doors closed, Daniel couldn't shake the gnawing fear that they might already be too late. Back in Liam's room, the tension was suffocating. Emma pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear any sounds from the hallway. Max stood poised, his body tense as though ready to pounce at a moment's notice. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. Emma's breath hitched, and Max let out a sharp bark. The sound was enough to make the intruder pause, but only briefly. The knob rattled again, more forcefully this time, and Emma instinctively backed away, clutching Liam tightly. "Go away," she shouted, her voice trembling. "I'm calling the police." The rattling stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, just as Emma thought the intruder might have left, Max lunged at the door, barking ferociously. A loud thud followed as if someone had been shoved against the wall outside. "Max, no!" Emma cried, fearing he might get hurt. But the dog was relentless, his barking a mix of warning and defiance. When Daniel and Dr. Harper arrived moments later with hospital security, they found Max still barking at the now dented door. Daniel burst into the room, his eyes darting between Emma and Liam. "Are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We're fine, but someone was trying to get in." Security officers swept through the house, their flashlights cutting through the dimly lit hallways. They found no sign of the intruder, but one officer did discover a set of muddy footprints leading away from the back door. "It looks like they ran off when they heard us coming," the officer reported, "but they'll likely try again." "Doctor," Harper examined the scene, her expression grim. "We can't wait for them to make another move. We need to figure out who's behind this, and fast." That night, as the family tried to regain a sense of normalcy, Emma found herself unable to sleep. She sat by Liam's crib, watching him breathe peacefully, while Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Max," she whispered, stroking his fur. The dog looked up at her, his eyes full of understanding, and let out a soft whine. Daniel joined her a few moments later, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this," he said firmly. "Whoever's behind this made a mistake tonight. They're scared, and that means we're getting close." Emma nodded, drawing strength from his words. "We have to protect him, Daniel. Whatever it takes." "We will," Daniel promised, But we can't do it alone. Tomorrow, we take this fight to them. The morning brought little relief. The air was heavy with a mix of unease and determination as Emma and Daniel met with Dr. Harper at her office. The attack on their home had left no doubt. Someone was desperate to silence them. Dr. Harper had spent the night reviewing hospital records and security footage. She handed a printout to Daniel, her expression grave. "I think I've found something." Emma leaned forward, scanning the document. "What is it?" "Transactions," Dr. Harper explained. "Someone has been using the hospital's resources for personal gain. Medications meant for patients are being rerouted or substituted with cheaper alternatives. That vial you found? It's part of a much larger scheme." Daniel frowned. "And you think this ties back to Liam?" Dr. Harper nodded. "The altered medication you found matches the serial number of one listed in these discrepancies. Whoever is behind this is playing a dangerous game with people's lives." Meanwhile, Max's behavior took another intriguing turn. As Emma prepared Liam for a walk in the hospital garden, Max began barking at a man in a lab coat near the elevators. The man froze, his face pale as he looked at the dog. Emma, startled by Max's reaction, pulled him back gently. "Max, it's okay," she said, though her heart raced. Something about the man's reaction felt off. Dr. Harper, who had joined them, noticed the man too. "That's Dr. Manning," she said quietly. "He's been under scrutiny for suspicious activities in the past, but nothing's ever been proven." Emma glanced at Dr. Harper, then back at Dr. Manning, who was hastily retreating down the corridor. "Do you think he's involved?" "It's possible," Dr. Harper replied, "but we need more than a dog's instincts to prove it." Max, however, seemed certain. His gaze followed Dr. Manning until the man disappeared around a corner, his growls low and persistent. Later that afternoon, as Emma and Daniel were discussing their next steps, a hospital nurse approached them with a piece of paper. "This was left for you at the reception desk," she said, handing it to Emma. Emma unfolded the note, her heart sinking as she read the words, "Stop asking questions, or you'll regret it." Daniel clenched his fists, anger flashing in his eyes. "They're trying to intimidate us. They know we're getting close." Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. "We can't back down now. If they're this desperate, it means we're on the right track." Dr. Harper entered the room moments later, holding a tablet. "I've got something." Security footage from last night shows a shadowy figure entering the hospital archives around the same time the attack on your house happened. Emma's stomach churned. "So, whoever broke into our home might be the same person trying to cover their tracks here." "Exactly," Dr. Harper replied. "And there's more. They accessed files related to Liam's treatment and Max." "Max?" Daniel asked, his brow furrowing. Dr. Harper nodded. "It seems they're not just trying to sabotage Liam's recovery. They're also interested in Max, likely because of the vial he found." The team decided to confront Dr. Manning, suspecting he might know more than he let on. Dr. Harper arranged a meeting under the guise of discussing a patient case. Daniel and Emma watched from a distance as Dr. Harper engaged Manning in conversation. At first, Manning appeared calm, but as Dr. Harper steered the discussion toward the altered medications, his demeanor changed. He became defensive, his voice rising. "I don't know what you're implying, but I've done nothing wrong," he snapped before storming off. Dr. Harper returned to Emma and Daniel, shaking her head. "He's hiding something, but he's too cautious to slip up." "We'll make him slip," Daniel said determinedly. "He's not the only one involved. If we keep pushing, someone will crack." As the day wore on, Emma noticed Max acting unusually restless. He would bark at seemingly random staff members, his instincts sharper than ever. It was during one such episode that Max led them to a janitor's closet near the archives. Curious, Emma opened the door. Inside, hidden beneath cleaning supplies, was a bag containing syringes, vials, and a stack of cash. Dr. Harper, who had accompanied them, examined the contents. "This is exactly what we need," she said. "Proof that someone is smuggling medications out of the hospital." "Could this link back to Manning?" Daniel asked. "Possibly," Dr. Harper replied, "but the presence of cash suggests this operation is larger than just one person." That evening, as Emma and Daniel processed the day's events, Max once again proved his worth. While the family rested in Liam's room, Max began barking furiously at the window. Emma peeked outside and saw a figure lurking near the parking lot. Daniel grabbed his phone and called security, but by the time they arrived, the figure had vanished. However, they left behind a chilling message scrawled on the side of their car. "This is your last warning." Emma shivered as she read the words. "They're watching us," she said softly. Daniel placed a reassuring arm around her. "Let them watch. We are not stopping." The tension reached a boiling point as the pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. Manning's evasiveness, the hidden stash, the warnings. It all pointed to a conspiracy within the hospital. But the question remained, how deep did it go and who else was involved? As Max lay at their feet, his loyalty unwavering, Emma and Daniel knew one thing for certain. They couldn't do this alone. The truth was out there, but uncovering it would require courage, resilience, and trust in their extraordinary companion. The atmosphere grew heavier as Emma and Daniel worked with Dr. Harper to untangle the web of deceit surrounding them. With Max's instincts proving invaluable and the hidden stash raising more questions, the trio was determined to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, while Emma reviewed security footage provided by Dr. Harper, Daniel received an unexpected call from an investigative journalist named Rachel Cole. Rachel introduced herself as someone who had been following unusual stories at the hospital for years. "I've been tracking anomalies in medication supplies and finances," Rachel explained. "When I heard about the recent incident involving your son, I knew it had to be connected." Emma listened intently as Daniel put the call on speaker. Rachel continued, "There's a paper trail, but it's buried deep. I have uncovered partial evidence that someone high up is laundering money through the hospital." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Do you think Dr. Manning is the mastermind?" "It's possible, but unlikely," Rachel replied. "He's probably a middleman. Someone else is pulling the strings. If you let me help, I can dig deeper." Emma and Daniel exchanged a glance, silently agreeing. They needed all the help they could get. Later that afternoon, Max's behavior took another alarming turn. As Emma walked him through the hospital corridors, he suddenly stopped, his ears perked and body tense. He began barking at a locked supply closet near the administrative wing. A passing nurse scowled. "What's wrong with that dog?" Emma ignored the remark and crouched beside Max. "What is it, boy? Is there something inside?" Dr. Harper arrived moments later, alerted by Max's barking. She unlocked the closet with her master key, revealing a shocking sight. Boxes of unregistered medications and documents containing financial discrepancies. Dr. Harper's eyes widened. "This is a goldmine of evidence. These medications don't belong here. They were never listed in our inventory." Emma carefully examined the documents. "This proves someone is siphoning resources." Max wagged his tail, his expression triumphant. Emma scratched his ears. "Good boy, Max. You've done it again." As the day progressed, Emma, Daniel, and Dr. Harper worked with Rachel to piece together the evidence. However, their progress didn't go unnoticed. That evening, as they met in Dr. Harper's office, the power suddenly cut out, plunging the room into darkness. "Stay calm," Rachel whispered. "This could be a coincidence, but let's not take chances." Daniel grabbed a flashlight from the desk drawer and shone it around the room. Max stood alert, his growl low and threatening. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "Someone's coming," Emma said, her voice trembling. The door creaked open, revealing a shadowy figure. Max lunged, barking ferociously, forcing the intruder to retreat. Daniel chased after them, but they disappeared into the stairwell. Returning to the office, he found Rachel holding a USB drive she had just removed from the computer. "They tried to wipe everything," she said. "Luckily, I saved the files." Dr. Harper sighed. "They're getting desperate. That means we're close." The group decided to go through Rachel's findings in detail. Among the files were old employee records, including one name that caught Dr. Harper's attention, Dr. Alan Travers, a former hospital administrator who abruptly resigned years ago. Travers was involved in a major scandal, Dr. Harper explained. He was accused of financial misconduct but managed to disappear before the investigation concluded. Rachel nodded. "I think Travers is the key. His resignation coincides with the timeline of the discrepancies I've uncovered." Emma looked at the documents. "If we find Travers, we might finally get the answers we need." That night, as the family settled into their temporary apartment, Max became restless again. He paced near the door, growling softly. Emma peeked through the peephole and saw nothing, but her unease grew. "Max senses something," Daniel said. "We need to trust him." Suddenly, there was a loud knock. Emma opened the door cautiously, only to find a manila envelope on the floor. Inside was a single note: "Stop digging or your family won't be safe." Emma's hands trembled as she read the words aloud. Daniel's face hardened with determination. "They're trying to scare us, but we won't back down," Max barked loudly, his protective instinct stronger than ever. Emma knelt beside him, stroking his fur. "We'll keep fighting, Max, together." The next morning, Rachel received a tip from one of her sources, Dr. Travers had been spotted at a remote cabin outside the city. The group decided to act immediately, arranging to meet Rachel there with Max by their side. As they approached the cabin, Max's growls grew louder. The once idyllic scene turned ominous as they noticed the curtains drawn and the front door slightly ajar. Inside, they found Travers, disheveled and wary. "I knew this day would come," Travers muttered, his voice trembling. "But I didn't think you'd bring a dog," Max barked once, as if challenging Travers to come clean. Rachel stepped forward. "Dr. Travers, we know about the embezzlement. It's time to tell the truth." Travers hesitated, his gaze flickering between the group and the documents they held. Finally, he slumped into a chair, his resolve crumbling. "It wasn't just me," he admitted. "There's a whole network involved, powerful people who will do anything to protect themselves." Dr. Travers sat in the dimly lit cabin, his hands trembling as he began to reveal the extent of the corruption that had plagued the hospital for years. Max sat at Emma's feet, his sharp eyes fixed on Travers, as if gauging the truth in his words. "It all started small," Travers confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Adjusting budgets, skimming a little off the top, but it grew. The higher-ups saw opportunities to exploit the system, embezzlement, falsifying records, even covering up medical malpractice. They got greedy." Rachel leaned in, her voice firm. "And Dr. Manning, is he part of this?" Travers nodded slowly. "He's a cog in the machine. A useful pawn, but the real orchestrators are above him, untouchable. If you go after them, you'll be risking everything." Emma exchanged a glance with Daniel. "We've already come this far," she said. "We can't back down now." Travers hesitated, then handed over a folder from a drawer. "This is everything I kept as insurance. Names, transactions, and locations. But if they find out I gave this to you—" "They won't," Daniel interrupted. "We'll protect you." Just as Travers handed over the folder, Max's ears perked up. He let out a low growl and darted toward the window. Emma peered outside and saw movement in the trees. "They've found us," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. A black SUV roared up the dirt path, headlights slicing through the gathering darkness. 4 men in dark suits emerged, their expressions cold and purposeful. "We need to get out of here," Daniel said, grabbing Travers by the arm. "Now!" The group hurried to the back door, Max leading the way. But as they stepped outside, one of the men shouted, "Stop! Hand over the folder!" Daniel held the folder tightly. "Run!" he yelled, shoving Travers toward the tree line. As the group sprinted into the woods, the men gave chase. Max stayed behind, growling and barking to distract them. One of the men lunged toward him, but Max darted away, leading the pursuers deeper into the forest. Emma's heart pounded as she looked back, terrified for her loyal companion. "Max!" she called, but Daniel pulled her forward. "We have to trust him," he said. "He knows what he's doing." In the dense forest, Max used his agility to outmaneuver the men, weaving through trees and leading them away from the fleeing group. When one of them got too close, Max lunged, snapping at his heels and forcing him to stumble. Meanwhile, Emma, Daniel, Rachel, and Travers reached an abandoned barn on the edge of the woods. Inside, they quickly barricaded the door and caught their breath. Travers, pale and shaking, muttered, "They won't stop. They'll burn the whole forest down if they have to." Rachel opened the folder and quickly scanned its contents. "This is explosive," she said. "Bank accounts, offshore transactions, fake identities. If we can get this to the authorities, it'll blow the whole operation wide open." "But how?" Emma asked. "We're trapped here." Just then, Max burst through the barn door, his fur matted with dirt but his eyes shining with determination. He barked twice, as if to say, "Follow me." Trusting Max's instincts, the group followed him through a hidden path in the forest. The dog led them to a narrow ravine, its steep sides offering a perfect hiding spot. They climbed down carefully, shielding the folder as they went. From their vantage point, they saw the men regrouping near the barn, shouting into radios. One of them pulled out a map, likely planning their next move. Rachel pulled out her phone. If we can upload this data to a secure server, they won't be able to hide. There's no signal here, Daniel said, glancing at his phone. We need to find higher ground. Max led them further up the ravine to a rocky outcrop overlooking the forest. From there, Rachel managed to connect to a weak signal. She quickly uploaded the files to a secure server and sent an anonymous tip to the authorities. They'll have everything they need to act, she said, her voice steady despite the tension. Now we just have to stay alive until help arrives. The sound of footsteps echoed below them. The men were closing in. As the group prepared to defend themselves, Max positioned himself at the edge of the outcrop, growling fiercely. Emma knelt beside him, her hand on his back. "You're our hero, Max," she whispered. One of the men spotted them and shouted, "They're up there." The group braced for the worst as the men began climbing toward them. Just as the tension reached its peak, the distant sound of sirens pierced the air. Police cars sped into the forest, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow among the trees. The men froze, realizing their time was up. Two of them attempted to flee, but Max barked loudly, drawing the officers' attention. Within minutes, the men were apprehended, their radios confiscated, and their vehicles searched. The police captain approached the group, his expression one of grim determination. "We've been trying to crack this case for years," he said. "Thanks to you and your dog, we finally have them." As the police secured the scene and took the captured men into custody, the group finally emerged from the ravine, Max leading the way with his tail wagging proudly. The officers were busy combing the area for evidence, their radios crackling with updates. The police captain, a stern but approachable man named Captain Reed, walked over to Emma, Daniel, Rachel, and Travers. "I've done something incredible," he said, his tone tinged with gratitude. "But we need you to come to the station to give statements and explain everything." Rachel handed over the folder she had saved. "This contains everything. Names, accounts, and proof of the corruption tied to the hospital." Captain Reed flipped through the documents, his eyes narrowing. This is enough to bring down not just Manning, but the entire network backing him." As Travers sat on a nearby stump, still visibly shaken, Emma approached him. "You've done the right thing," she said gently. "This can't undo the past, but it's a step toward justice." Travers nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I've been living with guilt for so long. Maybe now I can start to make amends." Max trotted over and rested his head on Travers' lap, as if sensing the man's anguish. Travers gave a small smile, scratching behind Max's ears. "He's more than a hero," he murmured. "He's a guardian angel." Back at the police station, the full weight of the evidence began to take its toll on Dr. Manning and his associates. The captured men confessed under questioning, revealing a sprawling web of corruption that stretched far beyond the hospital. Manning, now in custody, tried to maintain his composure, but faltered when confronted with the overwhelming evidence. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. I was set up, but the recordings of conversations, financial records, and testimonies from those involved painted a clear picture. Manning's crimes were laid bare, and his desperate attempts to deny them only made him look more guilty. As the news broke, the town reacted with a mix of shock and relief. The once revered Dr. Manning was exposed as a fraud, and the community began to rebuild its trust in the medical system. A few days later, the town held a small ceremony to honor those who had exposed the corruption and saved lives in the process. Max stood at the center of it all, his chest puffed out as if he understood the applause was for him. Emma knelt beside him, holding a medal that had been specially made for the heroic dog. "This is for you, Max," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You saved us all." As she fastened the medal around his neck, the crowd erupted into cheers. Max barked happily, his tail wagging furiously. With the hospital now under new leadership and the corrupt network dismantled, Emma and Daniel felt a sense of peace they hadn't known in years. Rachel, inspired by the events, decided to stay in town and continue her work as a journalist, using her platform to advocate for transparency and justice. As for Travers, he began volunteering at the hospital, dedicating his time to helping patients and restoring his tarnished reputation. He often visited Emma and Daniel, forming an unlikely but meaningful friendship. Months later, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a dramatic series of events. Max became a local celebrity, often seen accompanying Emma on her rounds at the hospital or playing with children in the park. One evening, as the family sat on their porch watching the sunset, Daniel turned to Emma. "You know, Max didn't just save us from danger. He brought us closer together. He reminded us of what really matters." Emma nodded, resting her hand on Max's head. "He's more than a dog. He's family." Max looked up at them, his expressive eyes full of love and loyalty, as if he understood every word. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the town, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been harrowing, but it had also been transformative. The truth had been revealed, justice had been served, and the bonds of trust and love had only grown stronger. Max let out a contented sigh and laid his head on Emma's lap, his medal glinting in the fading light. The truth had been devastating, but it had also been liberating, a testament to the power of courage, loyalty, and the unwavering bond between humans and their canine companions. With the dust settled and the truth now part of the town's history, Emma, Daniel, Rachel, and Max began a new chapter in their lives, marked by resilience, hope, and gratitude. The hospital underwent a complete transformation under new leadership, becoming a beacon of trust and care for the community. Patients and staff alike spoke of a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their facility now stood for integrity and healing. Emma returned to her work with a newfound determination, inspired by Max's unwavering loyalty and the lessons learned from their ordeal. Rachel, whose investigative reporting had helped expose the corruption, became a celebrated journalist in her field. Her articles on the scandal won accolades, but more importantly, they sparked change far beyond their small town. She often visited Emma and Daniel, finding comfort and camaraderie in their shared experiences. The townsfolk, once shaken by the revelations, rallied together to rebuild their trust in one another. They celebrated Max's heroism, often recounting his bravery to anyone who would listen. The local school even dedicated a children's storybook to him, titled Max the Miracle Dog, which became a beloved read for families across the town. Max's fame grew beyond their borders, attracting attention from national media and animal advocacy groups. He was featured in a short documentary about his incredible instincts and bond with his family. Despite all the recognition, Max remained humble, happiest when curled up on the couch or chasing squirrels in the yard. As for Travers, the weight of his guilt began to lift as he committed himself to acts of redemption. He often joined Emma in community outreach programs, using his past as a cautionary tale to inspire others to choose the right path. His bond with Max grew stronger, as if the dog knew Travers needed his silent support more than anyone else. One day, Travers approached Emma and Daniel with a proposal. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady yet emotional. "I want to start a foundation in Max's honor, to train rescue dogs for hospitals and families in need. What do you think?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "That's a wonderful idea," she said, glancing at Max, who wagged his tail as if to give his approval. The foundation became a reality within months, training dozens of dogs to provide comfort, support, and even save lives, just as Max had done. On a warm spring day, Emma and Daniel hosted a small gathering at their home to celebrate the foundation's launch. Friends, neighbors, and even the police officers who had helped during the investigation came to show their support. Max, of course, was the guest of honor, his medal glinting in the sunlight. As the event wound down, Emma stood up to give a short speech. "Max taught us so much, not just about courage, but about the power of love and loyalty. He showed us that even in the darkest times, there's light to be found. And for that, we're forever grateful." The crowd erupted in applause, and Max barked happily, his tail wagging furiously. That evening, as the guests left and the house grew quiet, Emma and Daniel sat on the porch with Max by their side. The stars twinkled above, casting a serene glow over the town. Daniel turned to Emma, his voice soft. "Do you think Max knows just how much he means to us?" Emma smiled, stroking Max's fur. "I think he does, but just in case." She leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Max licked her cheek in response, his eyes filled with the kind of understanding only a loyal companion could possess. As they sat there, watching the night sky, they felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey had been challenging, but it had also brought them closer, teaching them the true meaning of family, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their faithful dogs. With Max at their side, they knew they could face whatever came next, together. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you loved Max's story and the bond between humans and their dogs, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Do you believe dogs have a sixth sense that can guide us in our toughest moments? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories.